Thank you. First of all, also a nice day on behalf of EuroISPA, and we're grateful for having for the opportunity to co-organize this event and to speak here today. Maybe a few words about EuroISPA. When I would ask you to name a couple of providers, I guess most of you would be able to name, let's say, 5 providers, maybe 10. As I'm standing here, we are representing roughly 2,500 providers all over Europe, which is quite a lot, and which maybe also tells you that there's a lot of the internet ecosystem you have never heard about. I would say 90% of the companies who are essential to make the internet work as it is are relatively small companies you haven't heard about, and you will also most probably will not hear about in the future, because they're just doing an excellent job making sure the internet functions. And what's essential for these companies, and that's the same for the big ones as for the small ones, is that they need to be able to trust their own systems before they can actually go out and tell their customers, the European users, that they can use the internet, and the internet is a safe place to express themselves, to go online and to profit from all the internet has to offer. And I think it's also quite worth pointing out that we as Europeans are in a very fortunate position, was because we have excellent companies also here in Europe, which are kind of leading in the field of encryption and technical expertise in this field. Like, for example, Hubert is later going to speak. Some of you might know PowerDNS or FoxID. So he's really one of the people who is daily working with encryption, and he knows what's happening. And I think that's very good for this event, to bring together kind of decision makers and people who actually have the knowledge what's going on and what the challenges lie. And when speaking about challenges, our association, many of our members are running hotlines. That means if someone finds illegal content on the internet, they can go to a website and report it. And it's the job of the hotline then to move, to analyze the request and send it forward to law enforcement. So when I'm standing here speaking about encryption, I'm not only trying to give you the industry view from kind of an ISP perspective, because we also know what happens on the internet. We are not trying to, talk nicely about the challenges we see online, but we see there's a big discussion. We need to have encryption about the stuff that's happening online, because we know both sides in this discussion. So I think in respect to encryption, that has been said before by the first 2 speakers, we see encryption essential, first of all, for running the internet as it is now. I guess all of you would be very reluctant to do an online transaction, may it be in something you buy or money you transfer, if you would know that most probably the data will be seen by criminals and copied and abused. So encryption is essential for the internet as it functions, but also for people to encourage them to use it. If they assume that the internet is unsafe as it is, they will refrain from using it. And when it now comes to designing security, there's one thing that makes the whole thing very, very difficult. When you're designing security, it's binary. There's just a 0 and 1. You cannot, either you're trying to make a safe system, or you're building a system which is not safe. And so I think it's very difficult. That's actually what makes the whole discussion about encryption so difficult. There's no middle ground. There's no relatively safe system. Usually you're aiming to have the system at the highest standard you can think of, and this is directly going against what some member states are approaching us when they suggest putting backdoors in our software. Because also we do see, a potential upside of having a backdoor in our software in enabling, let's say, to catch a couple of criminals. On the long run, these backdoor will be exploited by a greater number of criminals. They will lead to espionage, and in the worst case, to oppression and mass surveillance. So we're very clear in this respect that we support strong encryption, and we are very much against any attempts of states asking us to weaken encryption or to build in any backdoor. And now I kind of don't want to end on a negative note. I think there's actually, law enforcement is in a troubled space quite now, because people use, first they used to write letters, then they used to use phone lines, and now they're going online, they're going IP, they're using messengers. But still, there's a lot of data out there police can use. And it was mentioned by Breyer, by MEP Breyer at the very beginning. even if criminals would be abusing the encryption tools we have and communicating, and we cannot see what they're communicating, we will most probably see who was sending a message to whom and where they've been at a specific point in time. And if there's a legitimate request from law enforcement in a country, they can get this information. Problem being, as it has also been said by the second speaker, if they're waiting for this kind of information for 8 months to arrive, it most probably won't be of any use anymore. Or what we see more often is that by the time the request from the local police force arrives at the ISP, we already had to delete the data. So there's lots of improvement on how the use of the data that is still there, traffic data, metadata, can still be improved. And Cathrin from the Commission, I think, might also say a few words about the e-evidence file. And I think we are going into a good direction in this respect, making sure that the data that is available can be used by police forces. And now I'm kind of coming back to the very beginning, but only, if safeguards are being met and only if the security for the exchange of information between law enforcement and ISPs is upheld. So from the view of industry, we very much embrace encryption as an aspect of security, and we are positive that we can thereby master the challenge we see right now in respect to encryption. Thank you.